Hi, Dr. Hammond. Here's my presentation for my final project. I chose to do my project on Symphonie Fantastique, which was composed by Hector Berlioz. Berlioz was from France. He was born Louis Hector Berlioz. He was born 1803 and passed away 1869. He was a French Romantic composer, and his works were so crazy that he didn't at first fit in with the conservatory styled learning and composition, so finally he reeled it in, and he went to the Paris Conservatoire but believes that he learned very little. He also wrote a very famous treatise on instrumentation in 1844. This focused heavily on the instruments of the orchestra and how they're used and how many should be used. His famous works include orchestral works such as Symphonie Fantastique, Harold in Italy. He also wrote choral works such as Requiem and La Enfance du Christ. He also wrote 3 operas, Benvenuto Cellini, Les Troyens, and Beatrice et Benedict. He also wrote 2 pieces that people consider hybrid genres, such as Romeo et Juliet, which he considers a dramatic symphony, and La Damnation de Faust, which is a dramatic legend. Symphonie Fantastique is a programmatic piece of music. That means that it's a piece that tells a story. Berlioz considered it an instrumental drama. The inspiration behind this piece was Berlioz attended a performance of Hamlet where Ophelia was played by Irish actress Harriet Smithson. Berlioz fell madly in love and would send her letters profusely, and she never responded. So he decided to write this piece about her and expressing his love for her through the music, and she did not hear it until 1832. And then she fell madly in love with him, realizing he was a genius. Unfortunately, their marriage did not last. It's also interesting to note that this was written while Berlioz was under the influence of opium. For instrumentation, the piece calls for about 90 instrumentalists, and that includes 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 4 bassoons, 4 horns, 2 cornets, 2 trumpets, 3 trombones, 2 ophicleides, which are early versions of tubas, timpani. There were 4 drums, but they were split, and 2 people played the drums, 2 for one person and 2 for another person. Cymbals, snare drum, bass drum, but the most interesting percussion instrument was the Berlioz bells, which I've included a picture on the PowerPoint that are made specifically for this piece. 2 harps, standard first and second violins, which he preferred about 15 violins for first and 11 violins for second, violas, cellos, and double bass. This was by far one of the most expansive instrumental works that had been composed up to that time. The movement titles, I've included the French names, but I'll read the English ones out, are the first title for the first movement, which are 5 movements, is Reveries and Passions, A Ball, Scene in the Fields, March to the Scaffold, and Dream of a Night of the Sabbath. What makes this piece so interesting and sticks out in history is Berlioz developed what is called the idea fixe, which is a fixed idea. And Britannica defines that as a recurring theme or character trait that serves as a structural foundation of a work. Berlioz can be recognized as developing this idea. He uses it profusely in Symphonie Fantastique, where themes that might mean Harriet pop up, and I will be showing those to you in a second. And they also show up throughout all 5 movements, sort of tying the story together. The first movement, Reveries and Passions, is this idea fixe, which is about Harriet. So this, every time you hear it, is Harriet coming into Berlioz's fantasy of him trying to profess his love for her. The second idea fix much faster, and this is in 3/8 and supposed to resemble a ball, or such as a waltz, not a literal ball. For the third movement, A Scene in the Fields, that idea fix sounds like this. There's Harriet's theme from the first movement coming up again. For the fourth movement, March of the Scaffold, this is when Berlioz, in his fantasy, marches to the scaffold and chooses to be decapitated so that Harriet can fulfill her love, because he shows this is his idea of how much he loves her. And then starts a fugal section. And the final movement is the darkest, and this is where the witches, or Night of the Sabbath, come and haunt Berlioz, which is probably when he was going crazy from the opium. But this is a very, very famous Gregorian chant called Dies Irae that is used prolifically throughout music. Through the Berlioz bells. And those are all 5 of the idea fix, or fixed ideas. Another thing that makes this piece very special is Berlioz used a plethora of extended techniques. For instance, he used one with a string section called col legno, which means with wood. And this is when the string players flip over their bow and use the wooden part of the pernambuco to strike the strings. It, in this sense, is supposed to imitate dancing skeletons and spiders. It's supposed to be a very eerie effect. He also chooses to use pizzicato, where strings are plucked with the fingers, allows for the instruments to sound very percussive. And finally, he also uses offstage instruments, specifically the oboe and the Berlioz bells. It depends on the conductor, but what this is to make the piece, or that sound more distant, so it sounds like you're actually in the story. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful break.